You know, in Shasta County, California, the very systems that are supposed to protect people, well, they're failing. We're talking about the jail, the mental health system, even the courts. They seem to be collapsing, one after the other, creating this chain reaction that leads to some truly tragic outcomes. Today, we're going to dig into exactly how this is all happening.
So where do we even begin? Well, it all starts with a story, summed up by this one absolutely chilling phrase from a legal document. This is how lawyers describe the death of a man named Randall Johnson, and his final days really expose a system that's just completely in collapse.
Okay, so picture this. It's August 2018, and Randall Johnson is in the middle of a severe mental health crisis. He had attempted an overdose. He needed an ambulance. He needed a hospital. But instead, he got a police car to the county jail. And there, while he was in obvious distress, an intake nurse just falsified his medical screening. She checked no to questions she didn't even bother to ask. He was then left all alone in a cell, and just 2 days later, he was dead.
And look, the tragic thing about Randall Johnson's death is that it wasn't just some isolated mistake. As we're about to see, it was a glaring symptom of a much larger crisis that's been unfolding inside the walls of the Shasta County Jail. And when you look at the data, it paints a really grim picture. Shasta County's jail death rate is significantly higher than the median for the rest of California. We're talking 13 deaths for every 100,000 bookings. And that's not just a number on a chart. It's a huge red flag that something is systemically, deeply wrong inside that jail.
And there is a massive financial cost to this kind of failure. The county ended up settling with Randall Johnson's family for a staggering $12.75 million. That figure alone tells you just how severe the negligence really was, and what the county ultimately had to answer for.
This timeline? It's awful. After Johnson's death in 2018, another man, John Adina, died in 2019 after alleged beatings. Then, more recently, there was this shocking spike, 5 deaths in just 13 months. And then, in 2025, a young man with schizophrenia named Juan Marino died by suicide in that exact same jail. These aren't isolated incidents. It's a recurring nightmare.
So, what's behind all this? Well, back in 2018, a consultant's report flagged a huge issue: staffing. Shasta County had a staff-to-inmate ratio of just 0.24. Now, to put that in perspective, a similar county, Humboldt, had a ratio nearly 3 times higher. The report gave a stark warning, saying that these dangerously low staffing levels would directly compromise inmate safety.
And this is really the key point, backed up by corrections experts like Jeff Schwartz. When you see a pattern of deaths like this, it's not about one bad actor or one bad day. It's almost always a result of deep, systemic problems in training, in supervision, in medical care, the whole shebang.
But here's the thing. The problems inside the jail, they don't actually start at the jailhouse door. They're really a symptom of an even bigger crisis: the county's profoundly, deeply broken mental health system.
So it really makes you wonder, right? What happens when you have a community where people in crisis have nowhere to turn for medical help? Well, they inevitably end up in the one place that can't turn them away: in the back of a police car. In Shasta County, this is where one crisis just tragically fuels another.
Think about this for a second. In a single year, more than 300 residents of the county had to be sent somewhere else just to get inpatient mental health treatment. And why? Because Shasta County doesn't have a local facility for them. That is a massive hole in the community's safety net.
So why is the system so broken? Well, the analysis really points to 3 main reasons. First up, a huge resource gap. And it was made so much worse when county leaders actually blocked a new state-funded psychiatric facility. Then you've got fragmented services. The sheriff's office, health services, the courts, they don't coordinate well, so people just fall right through the cracks. And finally, political opposition and public stigma often get in the way of any real solutions.
And you know, these failures, they aren't just heartbreaking stories. They have very real, very serious legal consequences. The county has been sued again and again for failing to uphold the law, forcing reforms from the outside that it just couldn't or wouldn't implement from within. Okay, so take a look at this. It's what's called a litigation heat map, and it basically lays out all the legal trouble the county is in. Every red, high-risk area you see represents a place where the county's failures are so bad they're triggering lawsuits. The jail is a critical risk, but you also see these high-risk warnings for violating federal law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and for conflicts inside its own court system.
Let's zoom in on one of those red zones: ADA compliance. That's the Americans with Disabilities Act, a federal law that guarantees basic rights. Well, this class action lawsuit, Jewett versus Shasta County, laid bare a systemic failure to follow that law.
The jail didn't have accessible toilets or showers, and inmates with disabilities were denied access to programs. The county was forced into a massive settlement that requires years of reform and court oversight. This wasn't just poor practice, it was literally against the law.
And the legal problems go even deeper, right into the court system itself. Higher courts have repeatedly had to overturn Shasta County decisions because of failures to follow due process. That's the fundamental legal principle that guarantees a fair process in court. On top of that, the county was caught illegally charging jury fees to some of its most vulnerable residents. So the system wasn't just failing to protect people, in some cases it was actively breaking the law itself.
So, okay, when you step back and look at all these pieces, the jail deaths, the broken mental health system, the nonstop lawsuits, a much bigger and, honestly, a much more disturbing picture starts to emerge. It's really about a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between a government and the citizens it's supposed to serve.
We can call this a fractured social contract. And what does that mean? It's basically what happens when a government's most basic promises, health, justice, safety, are so neglected and so politicized that they just completely stop working for the people they're meant to protect, especially the most vulnerable.
And this, right here, shows you the real-world cost of that broken promise. On one hand, you have county leadership pouring millions of dollars and countless hours into political fights, like manually counting election ballots. And on the other hand, all the stuff that actually matters for people, like fair wages for caregivers, a properly resourced child welfare system, and that desperately needed mental health facility, was being ignored. Which brings us to one final, really tough question. When a system that's supposed to catch you has this many holes in it, and people keep falling through, over and over again, who is ultimately responsible for the fall?